Hi, this is Arise Cake Creations and I'm Sarah. Making the flower definitely has the wow factor, but when you make the buds and the leaves, it always brings a flower to life and makes it look more realistic. Following on from the Frilled Oriental Peony tutorial that I taught, a number of you wanted to see how to make the peony buds and the leaves. So if you haven't seen how to make the Frilled Oriental Peony, then I will leave a link in the iCards for that. If you don't have the cutters, don't worry, there is the free template to go along with this, which has the petals and the leaves and also the calyx as well. All of that I will leave in the description box below. So with all of that being said, let's get started. I've listed all of the equipment that's needed for this tutorial on my blog at arisecakecreations.com. I'll leave the link for that in the description box below. So to get started, you'll need a small polystyrene ball of about 2 centimeters for the bud that's slightly closed, and then for the bigger bud you'll need a polystyrene ball that's about 4 centimeters in size. To make sure that you're using the right size polystyrene ball, make sure it fits through the cutter comfortably. The calyx on the peony consists of 2 parts, which I'm showing you now. Using an 18 gauge florist wire, bend a hook of about 1.5 centimeters in length. Do not squeeze it shut. You will then pass this wire through the polystyrene ball carefully so that it actually stops in the middle of the ball. Do not tug on it too hard so it doesn't come out all the way through to the other end. Do this for both the mid-size polystyrene ball and also the small polystyrene ball. Just to add, you may be wondering why we're using polystyrene ball to make the centre. It's just that it makes it more lightweight. You could actually make the centre with gum paste, but it would probably make it quite heavy. Also, it takes obviously longer to dry. Roll out your gum paste very thinly as you did for the peony flower, and we're going to use the mid-size cutter first and only cut 5 petals. Make sure to either have an acetate sheet or a plastic bag placed to the side of you or somewhere so that you can actually place your petals into, so that your petals don't dry out while you're working on them. These petals need no wires, but they will be prepared in exactly the same way that we prepared the peony flower. So take your peony veiner and your first petal and place it into the peony veiner and vein your petal. Place your petal onto a foam pad and using your ball tool, with the ball tool half on the petal, half on the foam pad, gently thin the petal edge. Also ruffle the petal edge by using the ball tool and moving it backwards and forwards so that it actually creates a gentle frill. Use the wide end of the Dresden tool just to further frill the top edge of the petal, and then the thin end of the Dresden tool just to create further texture on the surface of the petal. For the first petal, lightly brush your glue all around the petal, so closely to the edge and also into the center as well. Place your petal onto the ball and gently cup your hands to stick the petal to the ball. Also use your fingers to gently press the petal down. Now you may want to leave a slight top part of the petal edge slightly raised so that it's not completely stuck down, but generally overall we want the petal to be stuck down quite securely. Now you will probably see that there'll be ruffles where the petal isn't stuck down smoothly, but don't worry about this because there'll be further petals stuck on top of this. Take your second petal, but this time do not brush the glue too close to the top edge, but brush it around the rest of the edge and a little bit in the middle. Place it directly opposite the first petal. Now use your fingers to gently position it into place. Now what I did actually on the top, I actually did a slight overlap so that it created a slight bit of interest and texture to the center of the petal. Now you can choose to do this the same way, or you can directly choose to overlap your second petal so it overlaps completely on the first petal. With the 3 remaining petals, brush the glue as per the second petal, so do not brush it too close to the top edge, and those petals will now be positioned in the gaps that's left over. So literally position them so that the top part of the bud will have some interest, and again just use your fingers to gently position them into place. The key to making the buds is to make them look as natural as possible. So if you want to overlap the petals, you can. If you want to make them sit completely on top of each other, you can. But just make them look as natural as possible, as they would in nature. So here I'm showing you that you will probably have some gaps at the base of your bud. Now don't worry about this at all. As I said, the calyx will cover up all of those, so it's completely fine. For the small bud, we're going to cut just 3 petals out. The 3 petals will be prepared in exactly the same way, so vein your petals, thin the edge of your petals. Also use your Dresden tool to further frill the top edge, and also the fine end of your Dresden tool just to create further surface texture over the top of your petal. Brush the edible glue all over the surface of the first petal and gently position the first petal over the bud, making sure it's securely in place. Now again, you will have ruffles and wrinkles that will be there because the petal may be slightly bigger than the bud itself, but this is okay. You may also have excess petal at the base of your bud, and again this can just be cut away just to make it look a bit neater and less bulky. For the 2 remaining petals, you will actually brush the glue over the entire petal. Because this is actually more of a closed bud, we can actually make this petal a lot more closed. So brush the glue all over, position your 2 remaining petals in place, and again, if you have any excess petal at the base, cut this away and neaten up the base. Again, this will be covered up by the calyx, so it won't be seen. For the calyx, colour up some Gumpaste dark green. Use either a calyx cutter or the calyx template that I've given, and you will need to cut 3 calyx for each bud, so 3 for the mid-sized bud and 3 for the small bud. Use a ball tool to thin the edge of the first part of the calyx. Now if you have one, use your gem veining tool. If you don't have one, just use an ordinary veining tool just to pass over the surface, just to create some texture detail into the surface of the first part of the calyx. Take the calyx into the center of your palm of your hand and use a ball tool just to actually cup it so that it actually has a gentle curve in that first calyx part. Do this same process for the other 3 calyx for the mid-size bud. Brush edible glue along the V bottom part of the calyx and a little bit in the center, but do not brush glue along that top edge. Position each calyx to be glued on evenly around, so that's 3 calyx that will be glued on to the mid-size bud. As you can see from the video, I actually positioned my calyx over the parts that were exposed, so you may want to do the same if you have this same issue of your bits of polystyrene ball still peeping through. Just literally position it over those areas that are showing. For the small bud, you will brush more glue over the surface of the first part of the calyx. Because this is a smaller bud, you will find that when you add on your calyx that the actual calyx will overlap slightly, and this is fine because this creates more of a closed bud. So here you can see the difference between the mid-sized bud and the small-sized bud once they've had the first part of their calyx on. So for making the second part of the calyx, which is actually the sepals, roll out your green gum paste and cut out again 3 for each bud. Again on a foam pad, thin the edge of the sepals. Taking the wide end of your Dresden tool or a veining tool, you are now going to pass it through the center, and what that will do is actually create a natural curve as you pass it down through the center. Brush some edible glue at the base up to about maybe 3/4 of the way up the sepal itself, and then begin to position it in between each part of the first calyx that were actually glued on. Use your fingers to manipulate the sepals so that they look as natural as possible. Now at this stage you will probably not be able to dry it right side up, so I would advise that you dry it hanging so that it hangs down and dries into position before turning it the right way up. Repeat the process in exactly the same way for the small bud sepals and literally glue them on in the spaces that are there in between the calyx that were first stuck down. Again, you may have some excess at the base. This is okay, you can just cut that away and then just neaten up the base as best as possible. Now to make the leaves, you will need 24 gauge florist wire. Now I don't actually have a peony leaf cutter, so I will be actually using the template, and what I tend to do with the template is that I actually draw around the template without cutting them out, but you can choose to do whatever is easiest for you. Roll out your green Gumpaste over a groove board. So if you find by cutting out the leaf pieces and cutting round them works for you, then do that. Or if you find you want to do the same technique as me, which is just using a veining tool and then just drawing over the outline of the surface of the petals, you can do it that way too. Make sure when cutting out your leaves that you use either a sharp scalpel or an X-Acto knife or a knife to make sure that the lines are cut cleanly. Brush some edible glue onto one end of the 24 gauge wire, brush off the excess glue and then hold the leaf in between your fingers carefully and guide the petal through the groove. Use a ball tool to thin the edge of the petal. Now again, I don't actually have a leaf veiner for this, but then again, this is not a problem. Just use the veining tool just to create those lines over the surface. Now make them look as natural as you possibly can. So if you need to look at a leaf or go onto the internet to see what the groove lines or the lines, the vein lines look like, then do that. Using either a bumpy foam pad or a foam pad in general, or even some scrunched up foil, position your leaf into that bumpy foam pad or foil to make again it look as natural as possible. Once you've created all of the peony leaves that you actually need, set them aside to dry. Now this may take overnight or this may take a few hours, again depending on your environment or the type of gum paste you are using, but make sure they're dry before moving on to the dusting stage. Now you may choose to leave your peony leaves and buds at this stage, but if you want them to look a bit more natural, then dusting them is the best and next stage to do. Using some cornstarch, I also further softened my colours before brushing them onto the petals or the buds itself. Start by brushing the buds by just brushing lightly against the base, which is nearest towards the calyx. Now don't go too dark, but it is a slightly warmer colour just to kind of highlight the base. Use some of that same pink colour with the cornstarch just to brush a tiny part into the centre of that small amount of petals peeping through the smaller bud. With the green, I used it in its strong form and didn't mix any cornstarch. Now, peony calyxes also have a warm glow of burgundy, so I mixed up a small amount of burgundy just to add it as a tinge on the edge of all of the calyx on the small bud and also on the medium-sized bud as well. When brushing on the green onto the medium-sized bud, I also brushed a small tinge of green onto the actual petals at the base as well, showing that it's a younger bud, just to make it again it look more natural. So here you can see a close-up of the medium-sized bud. And a close-up of the small size bud. For the leaves, brush the edible green dust over both the back and the front. Also add some of that burgundy colour just to the tips of the petal as well, just to warm them up slightly. Once you've dusted everything, you can choose to steam them or you can choose to leave them. I would advise that you steam them because it's quite a lot of dust on the petals and it helps to secure the dust in place. It also helps to make the petals look a bit more natural. So either steam them with a steamer or clothing steamer if you have one, or just over a boiling pot of water, but be very, very careful with that steam. Now, I wanted to explain the peony leaves do have a very distinctive look. So here I'm showing you what peony leaves look like. They tend to have 3 leaves in the center and then 2 leaves either side. So make sure you create a set that's like that, maybe a big set and also a small set, so that your peony flower can look as natural as it possibly can. Have some light green florist tape ready and tape down all of your leaves. As mentioned earlier, the peony leaves do have a particular pattern, so bend the 2 outer leaves. The central one, which has 3 leaves on them, stays straight, and then begin to actually tape them on fairly close to that first central leaf. So you have the central leaf with the 3 part and then 2 leaves either side. For my smaller bud, I just chose to do 2 small leaves. Now again, you can choose how many leaves you want to do on this. Just bend one of the leaves slightly and tape them down. On taping everything together, I chose to bring my bigger set of leaves onto my bigger size bud. Just bend the leaf back slightly to an angle and then tape that together. And then for my smaller bud, literally just did exactly the same thing. Bend the leaves to a slight angle and then tape that to the smaller bud. I then brought the small bud and the bigger size bud together with the leaves and then just taped them together. Now these buds do look really pretty and effective on their own once they're all made up. That smaller size bud and that bigger size bud together do look really pretty. But when the buds are paired together with that finished peony, beautiful big flower, it creates a really dramatic and gorgeous effect. I really hope you found this tutorial useful and can't wait to see the peony buds and flowers that you will create. Remember, you can share them with me on Instagram or Facebook, or send an email to me at sarah@arisecakecreations.com. I can't wait to see your work. Please remember to like, comment, share and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you can be notified every time I upload a new video. Thanks for watching. See you soon.